without further ado, let's get the show on the road. The first question is, what is the difference between ERC20 Dusk and EVM Dusk, and why can't exchanges just list the former?
Okay, that's a good one. So, how does Dusk behave on DuskEVM? The Dusk ERC20 is just a token that is used in a context of just being able to transfer funds around, right? In the case of DuskEVM, we make Dusk the native currency, and what that means is it's used as the gas currency. In EVM setups and Ethereum-like systems, the token behaves differently if it is the native currency versus if it's an ERC20. So the behavior is different. The way you interact with it is different because in ERC20 lives inside of the Ethereum virtual machine, while in the case of the native currency of an EVM style system or Ethereum style system, it does not go through the EVM. Right, these two are separated. The accounts that are held there are separated. So, from a technical point of view, there's a very big difference. From an exchange point of view, it doesn't really matter that much because they already have multiple EVM integrations or Ethereum-like systems integrated, so they can handle the native currency. It's just the way that they receive the funds they need to be careful about. So. In the eyes of an exchange that, for example, has DuskDS already integrated ERC20, they can easily put the Dusk native currency for DuskEVM within their exchange. That's not a problem at all. But how you as a user interact with it from a technical point of view is different. So they cannot see it as one thing. That's just not possible because they have the state on different locations. But exchanges should be able to accept them if they support multiple chains. Now, I know, for example, Bitfavo, we've been in talks with them to get integrations going on different locations. And they, for example, only support, at least that was last time we spoke to them. I know that they've been working on changing this, but they only supported one chain per asset. Well, we at this point have BEP20. So with Binance Smart Chain, we have Ethereum itself, we have DuskDS, and we also will have DuskEVM. So we have the Dusk available in multiple places. So they do need support for that, but most do. So it's not a problem.
Okay, got it. Yeah. I guess the main concern was, or the hint was, why don't we start with getting the ERC20 listed on exchanges, and then they would have to bridge to DuskEVM, EVM Dusk, right? But it would, I guess, complicate things.
Well, I mean, we already have a lot of ERC20 listings, right? So that's sure. Not the problem per se. But also with this integration with DuskEVM, it's also not a problem. I think that even adding the ERC20 in that case would be much more difficult than just saying, just treat it as a new chain, but the currency you get from it is not Ethereum, it's Dusk. And for them, this is trivial to do because you have multiple L2s already that use a different gas currency than Ethereum. So, yeah. For them, it's just an administrative thing in the backends.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. That provides some clarity. Now, I'm probably going to butcher the name, the saying here, but someone is asking, could you please explain in Yip and Janneketal, which for non-Dutch, I don't know if I said that correctly, but hopefully, for any non-Dutch speakers, that basically means in simple terms, right, Hein?
Yes, yeah, exactly. I already know who said this. I can tell by the by the wording.
So they're asking, how does the L2 and L1 layers interact on Dusk? And I know we don't, like to use the terminology of layer 1 and layer 2 because there is some, it's not necessarily layer 2, but you can probably explain more about that. And how do blobs come into play? What kind of data is stored into them? And how the app layer connects with the settlement layer?
Yeah, okay, this is a really good one, also quite technical. In essence, the blob is crucial here. In essence, you can think of the blob just as anything, arbitrary data. Basically, what you can do is you can say in a transaction, hey, network, I have some data. And this data can be everything. It can even be like an encoded picture, right? But in the setup that we have with an L2, you can think of these as the transactions. So you store the transactions in a big piece of data, and this data has transaction changes. So let's say I send money to you, right? It's put in there, as well as, for example, could be the balance that we have. Now, the trick with these blobs is the layer 2s, or whatever system you have in place, they call it the batcher that processes the transactions that happen on this application layer. They compress this data. So, for example, what would be like a transaction itself is being squeezed into something smaller that you can then give to the L1, who then accepts this transaction and then says, okay, this is now part of the state. And then a system like DuskEVM can listen to the L1 and say, okay, if my system goes down, if I lose all the data, or if I'm a validator to this network, I can sync that data from what's posted on the L1. And in a normal setup, you would be able to challenge this data being posted. So let's say you run our DuskEVM instance, right? In this setup, you are the layer 2, and I am, let's say, the layer 1. Now, you send me a transaction with the data, which is in a blob, and you say, hey, these are the transactions. I'm saying, okay, sure, you pay your money, I accept this. But then someone else will be observing, like let's say Thomas, right? He will be observing, he says, hey, you defrauded something, you did something wrong. George, you tried to sneak in a transaction that doesn't belong there. And he can then challenge that. In normal setups, the L1 has zero awareness of this. But what we are going to do with the L1 is we are going to add some awareness in the system. And then you can prevent fraudulent blob transactions from being posted to begin with. So you're like doing a pessimistic, optimistic approach. We have some approaches there. We're not going to launch with that immediately. That's going to come afterwards. Yeah, so basically the blobs are essential here. They contain the whole state of the L2 and the changes that take place. Did I miss a part in the question? I think that covers the communication,
yeah, I think
right?
That covers the communication and how the app layer connects with the settlement layer, and that kind of explains it, right? Yeah.
I see that Dan also asks, do you already have a good setup for the finalization period? We don't have at the moment, right? The instance that we're going to release this with does not have this, but we do expect this to be following quite soon after, because the setup we have in mind is not that complicated. And the thing with our setup is also we can have contextual awareness of the DuskEVM instance because we control the L1, right? In the case of, for example, Ethereum and other L1s, they are neutral layers, but we can give these instances of DuskEVM or whatever is there precedent. And it's also what we want, right? Because we have the modular split.
Mm-hmm. Well, actually, this is a good segue into the next question, because the next question is asking about kind of like the differences between EVM, like regular EVM and DuskEVM. So the question is, what does the Venn diagram look like in between regular EVM and DuskEVM? And can everything that works on a standard EVM also run on DuskEVM, or are there any differences? And if it's not a perfect overlap, what kind of functionalities or dapps would fall outside these functionalities?
Oh, those are really good questions in there. The Venn diagram depends on what component of the Ethereum system you look at, but the Venn diagram is like plus 90%. I would even go as far as 98% the same, especially when we're talking about dapps and EVM coding, right? So we've already been testing this alpha drop here on a testnet that this works. It's also not surprising because in the early days of optimism, they had to do a lot of workarounds. And I remember this because I worked with this stuff back in the day. The early versions had different compiler setups for Solidity, and it was a complete pain to work with. That was horrible. This is no longer the case. They're basically able to do almost everything the same. There are some very tiny things that are different. So like the finality assumptions on dapps that run on the L2, you have to be a bit more careful with, because you cannot assume that things are final, right? Then in normal applications on Ethereum, for example, you say, oh, I wait 15 blocks because the finality is probabilistic. And this is not the case of the L2, because in essence, it doesn't really have a consensus. It does create blocks, but these blocks happen much faster. So that's also something you need to take into account. But in general, I would say everything that works on Ethereum should also work on DuskEVM, bar some caveats you need to take into account. There are some edges around the system that are different, right? So, for example, you don't have the consensus. The DuskEVM has a batcher, it has a sequencer, it has something called a validator node. You have proposals as well, but that's something that we've cut out because we don't need it. That I think that covers almost everything. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I think that does. So basically, most of the things work with a few caveats because, like you mentioned now. Cool. That's good to know. And also, we've been testing things on testnet. That is a little alpha drop in there. I like myself some alpha drop.
Yeah.
Well, since we've talked about testnet, we can maybe get into the DuskEVM side of things. Well, I guess, yeah, if we can, I'm going to go to the question about, the progress of DuskEVM, and if there's anything, if you can provide us with a macro view, at least, of what the progress is looking like with DuskEVM and what's still pending. I know we talked about this in previous chats with Emma, that the bridge and the UA support is still pending, but we would still love to get your view. Maybe you have some more detailed, information about it.
Yeah, I saw the summary from last time. So there it was said that done, and in DevNet is, for example, the side goal for blobs in progress, but that's complete. So we have most of the blob. I think the blob is basically done. The only thing we have done recently around that is the pricing, and that's a parameter that we still need to tune a bit to make sure that the gas costs for blobs are high enough versus the impact they have on DustDS nodes, because it can be that the storage requirements change if we do this, right? There is currently we keep the data forever. That is not supposed to be, but this is a trivial change that is currently being worked on. It's a tunable setting as well. There was some other things. For example, in the Explorer, if you go to the DevNet Explorer now, you should be able to see what a blob transaction is. And there you can already see that we've got that going. I lost the image. There were a couple of other things we... okay, I got it again. So the L1 bridge contract is still something... We have the contract itself, but that is done. It is some work around it. For example, we need to guarantee that if someone withdraws funds, that is actually happened, and we are working on setting that up. For example, there are validator nodes that exist, but currently the syncing of that is not complete yet. But we're looking to finish that in the next week or so. And then bridge support in the web wallet is probably one of the more difficult things. But that's also in progress. I think people can track it. There's some tracking issues on GitHub, and people can follow the progress there. It's in essence, you don't really need that to launch, but that would mean that that people that have Dusk on DuskDS cannot easily move the funds over to DuskEVM to play around with it, right? I think with these sort of things, it's not necessarily the implementation side that is a lot of work remaining. It is validation and also moving everything that we currently have from DevNet to testnet to mainnet. Especially moving to mainnet is something that's that needs to be done carefully, right? You cannot just. I mean, we have been testing a lot of this stuff in DevNet for a long while now, but we cannot just push it over to mainnet right now, right? I can't just sign off on that. There needs to be some validation and checks done, and everyone needs to be brought to remind to do that. And I suspect that we will put an announcement out for that in the coming weeks, so that everyone can prepare and have the blob transactions in place. But before we do that, I also need to be sure that the gas calculations and pricing and all that is in order, because we do not want a situation where people start spamming the network with blob transactions and everyone's nodes crash out because the droplets are full, right? Like they don't have any data left. That would be quite problematic for the network.
Right. So just a few, configurations in terms of the validation, and that looks pretty good. Thank you, Hein. I think that gives a better idea of, where DuskEVM stands at the moment. Sweet. The next question.
Yeah, and I think I can already say that we also have. No, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I think there was a bit of a delay. So one of the things that that we've been doing ourselves, right, is we've already been deploying some things on DuskEVM. So we've been testing Hedger, some other contracts, right, and we're also looking to have third parties running on top of it as well. Yeah,
that's also the main goal for
they'll see when
right?
They'll see it.
Yeah, we're gonna.
Exactly. Right.
Soon.
Yeah.
Yeah, there seems to be just like a 1 second delay, but I'm gonna try to keep things short on my end so that I can allow you to talk much more. What I wanted to ask. I wanted to ask because you did mention Hedger just now, and I was curious. I think Emma touched up on this in previous Team Hangouts, but I was also curious just because you mentioned it that we are testing Hedger. Do you think Hedger will also be launched with DuskEVM mainnet, or would it be a small time window between them?
I mean, it depends a bit. We have the functionality in place, so we can launch stuff with it, right, if you want to. But I think it also needs to fit in what clients want, right? So I don't think it makes sense to deploy Hedger, which is quite in a testing and validation phase, right? And then to then say like, hey, NPEX, here, take your asset and tokenize it, when we already have some more tried and tested solutions available, right? In the form of what we're doing with stocks. Because with stocks, we're also testing this on DuskEVM, right? And we have a different asset specification in place there that plays nicely with all of the ERC20 compatible dapps out there. And for Hedger, we have a way to do this, but I think it's too early days to start playing with that just yet.
Got it. Yeah,
we will probably put it on testnet, and then people can start playing with that one, right? But for the production version, I would not. I would be a bit more careful.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I mean, I think having it on testnet would already, cool down the curiosity of a lot of people of how you can play around with it and how it works. The next question is around the dapp, and I'm not sure how much we can actually talk about here, but someone is asking, while DuskEVM is being developed, the NPEX dapp is also in the works. This is something we communicated in the past. So is there anything we can share on how that's progressing, and if building that has taught you anything valuable about developing on DuskEVM, especially compared to other EVM solutions? Even for those of us who aren't EVM experts, it would be great to hear any interesting insights you've discovered so far.
Okay, wide array of questions within that. So when it comes to learnings, I think probably on one side nothing, because it's familiar, right? For me, it's really familiar, this stuff. On the other side, it has taught me something very important, and that is how to deal with liquidity across chains, right? Because DuskEVM is a bit isolated from a liquidity point of view. So on the application side, one of the things that I've been primarily thinking about is what can we do with liquidity, and how can we bridge over liquidity for existing crypto users, right? Because the target audience for something like stocks is multifaceted. You have traditional TradFi consumers, right? And you want to limit their onboarding, the difficulty in onboarding. So one of the things that I'm a big fan of is something like We Own, which is like this way to connect your Web3 wallet and to create them. And with account abstraction, we've gotten ways to create accounts without needing mnemonics. So that is something we heavily want to play in for TradFi users, that they can just use, for example, their Google account, and they can generate a crypto wallet, and then they can start onboarding in a very easy way.
Right.
They basically to the point that they just do the normal flow that they do in TradFi, but in the background they're using a blockchain. So this could be that they log in with, or they connect with We Own, which is a wallet abstraction tool. They create a wallet through to Google authentication, for example. They connect to Google, suddenly they have a wallet, and then they can deposit funds in there through, for example, just sending us a bank transfer, or NPEX a bank transfer, and then they get a stable coin in return that they then can use on the network. So that is one flow that we're looking at with this application. And the other flow is the crypto one. And the crypto one is quite difficult, because how do you get people to bridge over to your network? So one of the things that we've been thinking about is allowing payments on other networks, right? It can be any network, doesn't really matter. But we'll take the bigger ones. And then once the payment comes through, we reissue the asset in tokenized form on DuskEVM, and that way we can just move liquidity from crypto users on other platforms onto ours. Thinking about that was probably quite a learning experience, and it's actually quite doable to do. So, and in this scenario, you don't need bridges, which is still something we do have in the pipeline. But it's a nice UX improvement for end users, that they do not have to do the bridging themselves. We just receive funds, we redeem it, and we're ready to go. And then there was a question. What was the first part of the question again?
The first part was if you can share any progress around the dapp, basically.
Yeah. So the progress around the dapp itself, we have a stage launch in mind. We cannot launch it to begin with without DuskEVM in place, right? So we can put test deployments live on testnet. That's not a problem. But we have different modules within this system. So we have something that I call the tokenization engine, that is able to connect with and play with multiple different asset providers if we want, or different sources. So that can be NPEX as a source, but also 21x or whatever other party we want. And on the other side, there are things like a KYC module, an allow listing module, that sort of stuff. So one of the first things we can do is launch with the onboarding process, so that people can sign up, and then we can slowly add the assets. All of these components, also the front end, all of those are in progress in parallel. Those have been designed and are being implemented. and we will do a staggered approach on the launch. I do hope that we can launch part of it, like for example, the onboarding from a technical point of view when we launch DuskEVM, because that's quite far along. Whether we will do that from a marketing point of view is, of course, a very different story. So there is that we're obviously working on the rollout of how that would look like, right? And that plays a decisive factor in how this looks like. So I don't think it's necessarily a good thing to just launch without taking a more holistic view, right? So
right. It's not just about, of course, the technical part of things, but marketing and everything else that falls into place. But I think that's the most detailed progress update we've had on the dapp so far. So that was really interesting to hear. Thank you for that, Hein. Okay. Now, the next question was pretty much answered in a way already with your current answer about the dapp, because someone is asking what steps remain before a tokenized RWA will be seen on Dusk, and the first tokenized RWAs will be on the dapp, right? So we kind of...
Well, I mean, we can do it earlier, but there's no strong reason to do that because it contextually it has no meaning, right? I can basically take I could create an ERC20 token for some random bond that's on NPEX right now, but it cannot. It is nothing more than a spreadsheet at that moment. So you need a little bit more rich systems around it to go beyond some of the trivialities. Sorry.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, we can have tokenized RWAs on Dusk, but if there's nothing you can do with them or trade them, then what's the reason for having them?
Yeah, exactly. And that's also the matter of the underlying, right? So how do you connect the underlying with, for example, NPEX? At the moment, we cannot really do that because they work with a system that does not allow an integration with a blockchain, and we are working on that with them right now, right? So that's also a factor in the tokenization of their assets. That's separate from some of the other assets we're planning to provide, right? So that's also in the works, and those will be treated differently and probably go out first. And then you get into more interesting products like money market funds, maybe even tokenized stocks where the underlying is actually redeemable, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, that would be huge if tokenized stocks with the underlying being redeemable. It's actually something we don't see often. So that would be really interesting to see. Well, that would be the last question around DuskEVM and the dapp. So now we're getting into different topics. Now, of course,
I saw some in the chat. Maybe I can pick them up as well.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, there's one about what is going on with the hardware wallet support and DEX. I remember there was a grant for it years ago. So we are talking to DEX providers to launch a DEX on top of DuskEVM, right? It's a lot easier. A DEX on DuskDS is, pros and cons, let's put it like that. And hardware wallet support is natively there with DuskEVM. So it will not be there for DuskDS, but it will be there for DuskEVM. And then there was a question around, should we expect different, higher requirements for DuskDS droplets after DuskEVM gets implemented onto mainnet? And this is something we have to decide upon. We will let people know. I've done some calculations, and in worst case scenarios, we do need to be careful and make sure that everyone is prepared for this. Because we can be talking here, I think about like, I have to think about. I think about 20 gigabytes extra storage at least. So I think we at a safe point we need to have at least 50 available for blob storage if all the blocks would be filled. So, but it's not that much, right? And but we do need to properly manage that.
Got it. Yeah,
Tails is going to be quite can be quite an issue. Let's put it like that.
yeah, certainly. I mean, it is quite something important to communicate. So once we do decide exactly on what that's going to be, we're definitely going to put out a communication for everyone, all the node runners, to make sure everyone is prepared for what's coming. Yeah, that's a good question. I didn't think about that either. The next one is a topic that has been around for quite some time, and we just wanted a sort of update, or at least an idea of what basically the question is there any update you could give us around ITN rewards? And not talking about when, but more so around how they're going to be distributed. And yeah.
Okay. Yeah, this is one that I also like because I also have some rewards I think I should still get. No, but jokes aside, this one has been quite difficult because there's only 2 people in the company that can do this, I guess. And I'm not gonna name their names out of security reasons, but one might be in this call. Anyway, yeah, the thing with this is it takes some time, right? This is not a really straightforward process to do this. Same with calculating what the balance should be. For the staking contract we had on Ethereum, it's quite straightforward. We can easily get that back. But it also takes some time, and at the moment we have some different priorities for the people involved here. What I'm looking to do is to have this distribution happen partially on the DuskEVM. So for the Ethereum rewards that we had, easiest is just to mirror those to the same Ethereum addresses that staked back in the day. And for the staking rewards, to do that on DuskDS. But I'll have to double check this again to be sure. But yeah, it's just a matter of time, right? This is not something that can be done in an hour, I'm afraid. It will requires maybe a day or 2 or more from Sepia and myself. So yeah, it's it's quite an expensive endeavor given all the things we have to do. So
yeah. I mean, it is since we are trying to get everything out as soon as possible and achieve product market fit in the market ASAP. There are priorities like getting DuskEVM out and the dapp. But yeah, if only there was a cloning machine. That would be amazing. Having 20 Sepias and 20 Hein in the company, that would, phew. It would be too OP, guys.
Maybe a cool side project for a community grant fund.
Yeah, we could definitely put a grant to that. Okay, thank you. I think that's the most comprehensive update on what exactly it takes for ITN rewards to be distributed and how we are thinking into distributing them. Of course, the how we are distributing them is, like you mentioned, still not like 100% put into stone, but it gives us an idea of what we're looking into doing after DuskEVM is launched, so we can have the time and resources to prioritize for the rewards. But they will 100% happen.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think it's also nice to have it on DuskEVM itself, right? So that there's some liquidity there already, and it should be a nice, a nice boost for the network there.
Right, of course, yeah, that makes sense. Now, this is in a broader subject and topic regarding tokenized RWAs in general, but someone is asking, we see the USA greenlighting tokenized RWAs and some chains adding millions per week in RWAs. In your opinion, do you think the EU will be left behind in the RWA race?
I mean, this concept doesn't really exist, being left behind, because we're talking about an asset market that is in the tens of trillions of dollars, right? So $1 million here, $1 billion there is like a drop in the bucket. So it's quite meaningless, right? And in the EU, we are doing a very different game from what the US is doing. In the US, they're basically looking to tokenize assets and make them liquid for crypto markets, right? They're still in DTC, in the big CSD that they have over there. And it does not take away some of the inefficiencies you currently have in the existing TradFi system. So instead, it's more like a siphon away from crypto liquidity, more so than anything else. If this attracts people to move fiat over to crypto and then buy the asset, which is quite much a loop around, right? Which is just an extra step for the end user. But if that leads to that, then I guess it's a net benefit for the crypto market. But yeah, I can also open a Robinhood account and get the same effect, right? Just buy the asset there, deposit funds in there, and I basically have close to the same thing, and I actually have more rights in terms of ownership than if I get an X stock or whatever. So we are basically looking to get rid of that completely, where you do actually have ownership of the underlying, and where you have a relationship with an issuer or broker that does have responsibilities towards you. Right, so you can actually get yield, you can actually have voting rights, you can actually, when the company goes bankrupt, you know that they are in a separate account, and you always own the underlying, and you can also redeem the underlying, right? So it's a very, very different ball game. I don't see a lot of that happening in the US right now. And when it comes to, for example, legislation like DLT-TSS, and in the UK, I forgot what it's called there, but they also have a similar legislation that's even better. Then there you can do all this stuff that is basically mitigating all of the inefficiency you have in TradFi. And I don't see that sort of movement happening yet in the US. Maybe it's happening, but I don't think the Genius Act, for example, which is highly praised, covers this.
Yeah.
The Genius Act is just there that the pension funds can invest in crypto as one of the big key pillars of it, right? And yeah, that's quite cool if you are a crypto asset holder, but this does not change the things about real world assets that we are tackling, right? Once we get like the on-chain stocks and bonds there, and you have a DeFi system living next to it, and you can sort of make ETF buckets that consists of partially crypto, potentially bridged assets to DuskEVM, and partially stocks. Those can be stocks and bonds in startups or whatever you want. If you want to make a mix of ETFs, then you can do that natively on chain, and then pension funds, for example, can invest in those, which is quite cool, and they can get the yield on chain, and they can get a stable coin that they can then redeem back into TradFi if they really want to, but they can also use it as a payment method on chain. And suddenly the game starts changing, right? And the dynamics are very different from what you see happening now in the US, for example. But I don't see it as a competition. I wouldn't even see many of the other RWA projects out there as competition. I would see them as a liquidity bridge potential, where you can have both parties having value in working together to get liquidity from TradFi into crypto itself, right? And a lot of the RWA projects that we talk to and that we're looking to do stuff with around this, they are very interested in the compliance side that we offer through our partnerships, right? So I don't really see them as competition, and the chats we have with them is quite cordial. Even those that focus not on the EU, right? That focus on the US, or that focus on Asia, or on Dubai. And this space is so large, no one chain is going to rule this, especially with this multi-chain setup that you have these days with all these interconnected bridges. We are going to be one of the players, and our focus is heavily on the EU. So I hope that we're working heavily to getting a large market share there. We have quite some credibility with regulators, so that's in our advantage, and with institutional partners. But in the crypto space itself, we're not that large of a name yet, but that should change over time.
I love that answer. Yeah, it's a completely.
Please, I'll make sure I get no sleep until that happens.
You heard it, guys. But yeah, it's a totally different game. I love when the gears start spinning in your brain, Hein. It always is a very enjoyable conversation to listen to. But I think that gives a very good idea of
Yeah, it
how
takes
we're
a
looking
while,
at
but
things.
I have to wing it, right?
I love it. Yes, cheers, King Pendragon. The future is looking very bright. Well, now this is an interesting question, but this is around our, well, let's say, new policy of not really launching dates. Someone wants sort of a CTO's perspective on this. So the question is, what's the reason we don't share launch dates anymore? And if we're confident that there shouldn't be, shouldn't be any delays until DuskEVM, from now until DuskEVM. And from a CTO's perspective, is the matter of uncertainty or perhaps a lack of confidence in committing publicly to the dates?
Yeah, I mean, I can be very honest about this. I think it's a combination of both, right? It's that we have a, let's be honest here, we have a bad record in this regard, right? And I don't want to dig into why, but you can probably analyze a couple of locations why this is the case. I think it doesn't really matter that much because the other side is actually quite important, and that is we're dealing with things here where there are a lot of unknowns and a lot of complex systems, and you can, to a certain extent, analyze this down, right? You can do a very large upfront analysis, and I must say we've changed this where before we did this less, so we are now doing that more for like the big bucket projects like the tokenization application and DuskEVM. We do like professional project plans, and we sort of lay down like what is the rationale for doing this project, what are like the key deliverables, and how should it look like, and what do we not want to include, right? Which is very important because that is where you limit, for example, feature creep and any sort of big changes in requirement analysis. So this aspect is quite important, but it does not capture everything. And it does not capture everything because when you start working with this technology, especially something that someone else built, and I must say Ethereum itself is already a beast, right? Like Dusk itself is a beast in terms of technology. Ethereum is a beast. And then Optimism itself, the things that they've added is also gigantic. So you need to see how these pieces fit together. And sometimes you fit them together, you do an analysis, but in practice it's quite different. And this is where the danger lies, because you make certain assumptions, you check the assumptions seem to check out on the analysis, but then in practice it's different. And this is where we have to be very careful. And for example, one of the things that I've seen is in our testing, I can give an example. We set up, we did a staged approach to switching over. So first we took an L1 instance of Ethereum, and then we started moving away pieces to switch over to Dusk, so that to make them compatible. And when setting up, let's say, an unannounced testnet, potentially, hypothetically, right? An unannounced testnet, we did set up an L1, but we don't have a lot of experience with running an Ethereum L1. And we ran into some issues there as well. And suddenly I, for example, and one of the guys at Lumos, we lose a day or two, right? And that's something you do not necessarily account for, because this is a cascading effect on some other things that had to do with for example, API keys not working for some external service you use. And then suddenly you're losing like 3 days, right? And this is just a simple example, but you come across those things more and more if you go deeper into these things. These are very complex systems, so I'm a bit hesitant. Let's put it like that. We account, of course, for overrun in the specific tasks we have, and when we analyze, for example, a certain approach to take, we think about, okay, these are the 5 approaches we have. We can already eliminate 2 of them because they are too risky or they have too much complexity, and then you have 3 and you have to dig into, okay, how does this then look like? And then you write off another one because the complexity is higher than the other 2, and the other one is, for example, leads to problems down the road, And you have to think about all of these factors, and it's just not that straightforward as, for example, let's say, okay, I want to change the color of this specific button on the website, or if I add this API to my microservices architecture, okay, I need to add a field in the database. So there's too many unknowns in the analysis on the security side here versus a lot of stuff that I'm used to.
Yeah.
And a lot of stuff that we see at Dusk is usually from a much higher complexity grade.
Yeah, that actually explains it perfectly, and I don't have a lot to add on top of that. But basically, exactly, the technology that we're working with is much more complex than a simple like HTML code, like you mentioned, right? Changing the color of a button is much simpler than the complexity of the infrastructure and the technology that we work with. So there's a lot of unknowns, which in turn, even though in theory, in our analysis phase, things do make sense, then there's a lot of unknowns that could happen that would, take us back 2, 3, 4 days, depending on the complexity of the thing we're working on. So that does make it a bit harder to set a final date before we're actually, closer to it and certain that it could happen. Basically getting rid of the unknowns, right? It takes a bit of time to get to a place where there's not a lot of unknowns.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and these fall in the category unknown unknowns. But I must say we didn't really have a lot of those that are very impactful on DuskEVM. So that has been quite nice because we did a pretty good analysis up front. But there's always risk, and you can say, okay, let's mitigate these risks, or let's overestimate and then announce it. But then when we don't follow up on it, it's a problem. And I also don't think that tech should be leading in this, and we've been changing that a lot, that we say, okay, tech is the leading decision maker, and okay, it's done, we release it. But we try to take a more holistic look, right? So we try to loop in BD, we try to loop in marketing, as you know, and we try to see, okay, tech is estimated to be ready at this date, but let's say we, for example, want X amount of partners to launch. They cannot do that within that week. Maybe the week after we can launch with these partners. Then that becomes the leading decision in whether we do it or not, right? For example. So, and also from a biz dev point of view, right? Like, how does it fit together with the requirements of partners that we have? So, I think the holistic approach is a lot better, and the careful approach, I can imagine, is quite frustrating if you're like on the sidelines and you don't have the context that we have. But it's also to prevent any issues like we had in the past, right? Because this sort of stuff really hurts our credibility, and we're constantly on the defensive about it. And that's not a position that you want to be in. For someone like me, and I assume it's for you as well, and also for most people listening here, we want the project to do well, and we want products to go out as soon as possible, and to see activity going, right? To actually see all these things that we've been talking about for years actually come to a logical conclusion, and then being able to realize this vision. And yeah, it's sometimes a tough road, and we need to build up from a painful location. But I hope that people can understand why this is the way that we're reasoning about it, right?
Yeah. I think
you don't have to agree with it, right? But just
just understand where it's coming from.
I sometimes don't agree with it either, right? But yeah, exactly.
No, I think that was a perfect explanation. I love that. I love that, Hein. Thank you. Now, the last question, and the one we can do to close off this hangout. It's actually a bit later than we try to keep these, but one last question, Hein, and I quite like this question. On a scale of 1 to 10, or 0 to 10, how bullish are you, and why? And I know they're saying that I know there might be too much quality depth in this question for the general audience, but they had to ask.
Oh wow, this is dangerous. I can go on a tirade, but I'm relatively low energy today compared to normal, let's say. But Yeah, I mean, scaling, like it's really high. I think if I say a 10, then people will not take me seriously, right? Because I'm overselling it. My wife always wants me that I oversell stuff to her, so I'll say a careful 9.5, right?
Respectable.
Why am I bullish? Yeah, a respectable 9.5. Why am I bullish? Well, you do see that that there is a movement going here towards this RWA side, that more tokenization is happening, right? It's not the tokenization that we've been talking about for years. So it sort of muddies the water in a narrative sense, but it doesn't really matter because the cake that we're talking about is so massive that that it's really easy to just get 1 billion in TVL, right? And because we have a lot of in-house knowledge on finance itself, understanding of the space that we work in, right, with TradFi, it's often that when we talk to crypto parties, they're like, whoa, is this true? I don't even know that this stuff is the case, right? Like they have almost no clue about any of this, right? They're very, I would even go as far as saying ignorant about the topic of compliance and legal ramifications of the things you do in terms of tokenization. Those that get it, it's really interesting to talk to them because they see the value add and they're like, wow, we want to work with you guys, right? So luckily, there are enough of those that see that, and out of that, we've had some really interesting discussions in how we can basically move the assets that we want to provide to other solutions as well, right? So that they become sort of a broker of the tokenized assets that we have, or a reseller, which is really cool. Which basically means we can leech off of their user base, while at the same time they have another revenue source. So those discussions with third parties, we've done a couple of in-person whiteboarding sessions about this as well. Have been I really enjoy, like because you're actually now talking to people that have a user base, and we as a protocol can be a source of something that the end user can use, right? Which is yeah, it's just a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And then on the other side, yeah, so basically this being able to deliver these products and seeing that happen, and the massive move towards RWA is really good. And on the TradFi side, because I didn't cover those, because when we talk to them, they understand what we're talking about. They are really open to working with us. And surprisingly so, even because they do not care about market cap, TVL, all this sort of stuff, right?
Yeah.
They care more about your credibility. So the conversations there are very different from when you're talking to DeFi people. And also when you go to a regulator and we sit on the table there, and they don't really talk that much to other infrastructure protocols. But when they do, they can tell that the vectors that people think about are very different from what we do. Because we try to look at, okay, how does finality look like? When does an asset actually reach a user's wallet, and who's responsible in the in between time? And what happens if the network goes down, right? There are a lot of complexities in there implementation-wise that we can explain that others cannot. And that others do not necessarily have a solution for as well, right? And yeah, it's really good to see that regardless of how we might perceive things, how people see that things happen, that behind closed doors, the perception is completely different. And I really, really hope that this perception we can translate to the outside world as well, because then I think everyone here would be happy.
100%. Beautiful answer. Thank you, Hein, and beautiful session. There's so much to digest from this session, and I know a lot of people are going to be interested in seeing the recording and the summary. So thank you, Hein. I think we can close the session here. We answered quite a lot of questions, and Yeah, it was a beautiful session. I'm going to make sure to upload the recording and the summary for everyone tomorrow. And that's it. Just want to say a massive thank you for answering and being with us here today, because that was a really good session. I quite enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you. I hope it wasn't too rambly.
No, certainly not. I think there was a lot of really good information that you shared. So definitely not rambly. I think it was perfect amount of information to get into. So thank you, and thank you everyone that showed up for the session today. It was a great one, and we're gonna do another one next week. But we'll share more about it once that time comes. So thank you guys. Have a good rest of your day, and I'll see you next week. Thank you, Hein, again.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you guys also for the awesome questions. So were really good ones in there, all of them.